I never made one of my discoveries through the process of rational thinking. Albert Einstein. Welcome to Deep Dive Creatives, a podcast that explores creativity. I'm David McGinnis, host of Deep Dive Creatives. Hey, if you're a fan of creativity, hit that subscribe button. That promotes my podcast that celebrates the creative spirit. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the notification bell to let you know when the next episode is available. Also, leave a comment. What are your thoughts about the creative process? That also helps to promote the podcast as well as encourages conversations about, well, you guessed it, creativity. Meet Justin Panneck, also affectionately known as Dr. J.
Of course, I could dive into the neuroscience, but I don't want to do this because this is a podcast about creativity.
Justin is a licensed professional counselor with a master's degree both in counseling and education, as well as a PhD in health psychology with a focus on effective coping mechanisms and a focus on alternative healing modalities. You'll learn more about that later. Justin grew up in the South in a community structured around Southern hospitality and charm. Well, as a rambunctious child, Justin had to learn how to exist in that type of culture.
As a child, I came into this world like I have all this energy, and my upbringing was not perfect. It was rocky. There was a divorce and a lot of challenges, stepmothers, and I think what that did, being a very sensitive soul that I am, just being very, very in tune with everything, it made me listen, right? And so I became one of those listeners.
Justin had an innate desire to develop that listening skill, but was also dealing with issues from a tumultuous childhood. He wanted to reach out and grow, but he also wanted to protect himself.
I sort of put on armor, intellectual armor, right? So I went to school, did my undergrad. I studied a variety of different topics. I was all over the map: philosophy, art, film, psychology, science. And I felt that I put on all this armor to sort of separate myself. And in that process, I gained a lot of knowledge, but only later did that become wisdom when I got into counseling.
Justin's path to becoming a professional counselor was an adventurous and a varied path.
I had an assortment of really interesting and unique adventures and experiences. And so I feel like I was able to really transmute, incorporate all of those experiences, all of the knowledge. And my undergrad experience was probably one of the most amazing, beautiful experiences because Boulder. So I went to the University of Colorado. It's just a magnet of really unique, interesting people. And so it was a blessing for me to be able to be under the tutelage of some very amazing, talented people. And I learned a lot about the world. And I started to see connections among everything, right? And so they gave me a really good understanding of the human experience and what we go through and why we do the things that we do and why we suffer. And it's been really a lifelong journey for me. And really only in the recent maybe 5 years have I really honed in on some really important stuff and have incorporated more of my creativity into my practice.
Justin was able to leverage that creative drive to pursue the kind of job and become the type of counselor that ignited his creative spirit.
With the practice, I can hone the craft, seek out certain people and individuals that I want to work with. And the beauty of that, what I love about this, and I'm realizing that I had to create my own dream job, because in that process, not only am I using all of the wisdom and experiences and knowledge from my mentors, from my family, from ancestors, but I'm also working on myself. And it's beautiful. So it's not even work for me. It's play at the next level.
One of Justin's creative approaches to counseling is utilizing ecotherapy, which is a type of therapeutic treatment which involves doing outdoor activities in nature. And one of the outdoor activities that Justin absolutely loves is hunting for mushrooms.
I'm a big mushroom nerd. I love mushroom foraging. It's like Easter and Christmas rolled into one. I mean, it's a birthright. It's a human birthright. And one thing I've noticed when I do my own foraging is, you're just out in the forest. You're surveying the land. You're just watching. And then one thing I've noticed that's really interesting is like when you find one mushroom, you bend down, and what you're doing is you're slowing down. And then you look around and you see a lot more. And it's a perfect metaphor for life, where it's like sometimes we just need to slow down.
Justin was able to expand on his ecotherapy practice through a connection that his young daughter made for him.
I had just moved to this new neighborhood, and my young daughter, who's like just really, really outgoing, and she talks to everyone. She's just out in the neighborhood talking to people, and she's like, Dad, you gotta meet this guy. And he was an ecotherapist. I'm like, wow, that's like what I've been wanting to do. And it's an ecotherapy farm in Canby, Heron Hill, and 70 acres. They do equine therapy. They have like 20 horses. They do archery, shelter building, fires, and I was just in love. This was like perfect. So that was a seedbed for me. It gave me permission to go way outside the boundaries. And a lot of the clients, so I worked with children too, and I could not imagine the children that I worked with being in an office setting. Like I don't even see how that could work.
As Justin unpacks his thoughts about the subject of creativity, you will no doubt be challenged by his intricate and thorough explanation about the creative process. And no doubt you will be inspired to continue your own journey down the wild and untamed path of creativity. Let's dive in. So Justin, how do you define creativity?
That's a good question. So of course I could dive into the neuroscience, but I don't want to do this because this is a podcast about creativity. But just one little snippet on the neuroscience, what I have noticed, because I've been really in my work studying the brain and how it's wired, because I think it's really important to know that. It's important to know your design. I think that's really the only way to heal is you have to know where you're coming from. You have to know what your design is. It's similar to if you were to go on a battlefield, you got to know what the territory looks like. What I've noticed about creativity is I'm very interested in left brain, right brain, and also what's known as System 1, System 2. So System 1 is the older part of the brain that's wired for survival. It's connected to the amygdala, emotions. It's what keeps us alive. And so what it does is it underthinks, overreacts. And that's actually flow state. System 2 is the more highly developed part of the brain, the frontal lobes, and it does the opposite. It slows way down, it assesses, and it predicts. And so it does the opposite of System 1, which it overthinks, underreacts. So you have these two systems that oppose each other, right? Creativity is when you can find freedom and space within those two networks. And that's something in my practice I have, the last 4 or 5 years have developed and honed a practice to help people to find that inner peace, that space, so that they can have spontaneous creativity. They can move into what I call state changes. State changes can happen immediately. And a really good example of that is, let's say if you're, hanging out with friends, and maybe this time you're just not, like witty like you normally are, or, you're a little self-conscious, and now you're overthinking, and now you're digging yourself into a hole. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not. If you immediately, in that moment, if you're like, I am okay where I am, it's totally fine. And there's a whole process that I have regarding that. But what happens is it's an immediate state change. If you're telling yourself you're okay, it lifts the expectation. And I have this saying: if you can trade expectations for appreciation, you're good. You're golden. And that's essentially what creativity is. It is a radical acceptance, right? And it is also an awareness, and then you're able to express yourself. And I had this mentor that told me once, practice the yoga of ordinariness, because I can remember trying to impress always. I'm going to use big words, what do you think about my knowledge? And what I came to realize, there's a release. And so you move from competition to collaboration, right? So if you're in that sort of competitive mind state, me against the crowd, you're actually constricted. Even your throat muscles are constricted, and you have to really try to force yourself out there. And it's a concept known as power versus force. If you release and let go, and you're like, I'm just going to be myself, what happens is you actually release, and your true power comes out. And it's almost like there's a voice speaking that doesn't even seem like it's yours. There is a very specific process for that flow state, and over time I've really started to collect these, you could call them neuro hacks, little tricks of the trade, little things that you can do on the spot to open yourself up in a big way. One of those would be to, there's like the sort of the Wonder Woman pose, where it actually boosts testosterone by like 20%. So if you change your physiology, that actually changes the chemicals that are flowing through your brain. You're activating chemicals. So I very recently I came up with this sort of a rhythm, or it's a song called Rivets and Divots. And Rivets and Divots came from, I was taking a late night walk, in the park. And I was just doing this sort of left foot, right foot, left, right. And this sort of like rhythm, and these words came into mind: rivets, divots, rivets, divots. And it relates to system 1, system 2. So system 1 is divots. It's the well-worn patterns. It takes shortcuts. Rivet is the little bolt that tightens up, right? And this is what I realized, is I just discovered kind of like an EMDR practice, a natural EMDR. And so if you can get a client out there to do this specific process, and have an actual process where we'll go out and we'll start, just like a rhythm, left, right, left, right. You can even do like a little tapping like that. And then you can start with rivets, divots, and then you start looking around. What else do you see? Okay, yeah, plants, bark, rivets, divots. And then you start introducing imagery into that. And then you sort of also now you're in the rhythm, you're in a flow state. So now you can kind of introduce a little bit of ridiculousness, a little nonsense. And you have to really be in that flow state for that to work, right? And so that's when this creative process is emerging. And it's about finding that space. And a lot of that really is in this emotional mastery program that I've created, where you're basically just getting distance from what is happening within you. So if you get anxiety, for example, or even depression, what you're experiencing is just a physiological phenomenon. And what we do as humans is we attach to that. We identify with it. Oh, I'm depressed. I'm anxious. Well, really, it's a feeling. It's a sensation. Dive into it. What is it about? What's happening in your body at that moment? And in that process, what you do is you learn to separate from that. And when you separate, now these things are just kind of moving through you. It's a flow. And then now you can witness, you can see more, and that gives you more insight. Now you can use that system two, which is that sort of, that clamp, that divot. You can use that to your advantage by asking deeper questions. Where is this coming from? Or what is this, even in the creative process, if you fail or have something that doesn't work out, what is this trying to say to me? What's the message, right? So yeah, that's the kind of process I'm doing with clients, and it really helps to be outside in nature, to be very experiential, and introducing movement in the body. That's a very, very important part of that. The thing I like best about that process is really seeing people light up. And especially with that, the rivets and divots thing that I've been doing with clients, it's a brain tingle. Like you can see goosebumps on people, and I can feel it too. And a lot of the therapeutic process really is it's mirror neurons. It's a feeling. It's an interaction. And so seeing that just light shine and light up is a really beautiful thing. And knowing that, people are like, wow, I've gone through so many therapists and you truly see me. The thing that really inspired me to work in this field, and I didn't realize this until later, but I always wanted to, help people, of course. And I've always had, those mentors or people in my life who were just different from the rest, that really paid attention to me, where it's like the world stopped for a moment and I was the only thing that mattered. You don't see that a lot. That was the thing that inspired me, just at that level. And then looking further back, I realized there are a lot of other things that inspired me, like listening to certain, folk songs like John Prine, because he's a trickster. He's funny as hell. He's different. He's a renegade. And so that inspired me in the sense that I realized in order to truly heal people, I have to be a trickster. I have to go outside the boundaries, because what's happening inside the boundaries is not healing people. It's truly not. And so that's like my true motivation. All those songs and artists I listen to. I love comedy. Comedy is gold. And so even stand-up comics have inspired me. So I would say, yeah, just the ordinary people in my life, even my grandfathers. I come from this lineage of what I call the prodigal sons. And they're men who were rebels, but also had really strong values. And I just always that hit me different. Oh, wow, you can be a real person and have strong values, but you can also push the envelope. And my grandmother and grandfather, they were storytellers. I came from that tradition, being in the South, of storytellers. My mom, my dad, really, really good storytellers. And it just opened up this world of possibility, knowing that you can really do anything. You are the architect. And so that's kind of the translation for me, in the inspiration is I can bring that knowledge and wisdom to the people. I have mentors in different categories. So I'm really big into mythology, and what's known as the mythopoetic men's movement. So Robert Bly being one of them, who has since passed, but in the 70s and 80s, he started this huge men's movement. And so Francis Weller is a therapist, but he's what's known as a soul activist. and he's all about the soul. What does the soul want? So if you're experiencing depression, okay, well, let's lean into that. Let's not try to get rid of it. There's a message there, and it could probably be, okay, the world around you is going way too fast. It's telling you just need to slow down. And so messages and wisdom like that has been a huge, huge inspiration. And then I would say too, stand-up comedy, has been really, really big for me. I make that part of my regular sort of study. I'll watch stand-up comedy, but Reggie Watts is a huge influence. He's a musician, and he does. It's all improv. So he apparently does not prepare for a single set. He just goes right in, and that to me is like you're leading from the heart. And that takes courage and vulnerability. And I immediately saw the connection to the work that I do, which is to help lead people, and help them to understand that, it's okay to be vulnerable. When I was 9 or 10, I had an actual 8-track tape player. And I had 2 8-track tapes. One was Chris Christopherson, and the other one was John Prine. And I inhaled John Prine. There was something about the rhythm. When I listened to him, what I just recently realized is I feel like he sees me. He's a bard of the broken. I felt so comfortable. He's taking the challenges and discomfort and the ordinary and turning it into art and beauty and just being a trickster. And I think that's, I truly, deeply identify with the trickster archetype, which is you're having fun, you're going way past the boundaries, you're pushing the envelope. And then just, family, like my grandfathers and people like that have been big sources in terms of mentorship. In terms of dry spells, I've come to realize that the well's never dry. And what is happening is going back to the system 1, system 2, you're back in that sort of rivet. Maybe you're overthinking. And so it's not that there's the well's dry, it's that there's expectation there now. There's perfectionism, there's we've got this sort of programming of where we need external validation, right? And that's hardwired as we grow up as children. And even like with great parenting, you come into this world with all this energy, millions of years of evolution, and like, yeah. And then your parents are like, no, you can't yell, you can't take your shirt off, you can't, And so the young brain doesn't really understand what's happening, and it thinks, oh, I can't be myself. It's threatening my survival, literally. And so I think that the dry spell is just, it's going back to that default setting. So we have to stand guard at the door of our mind every day, and we have to have certain practices. So what I do, like if I do have like a quote unquote dry spell, or I'm stuck in a certain way, I just do something different. I move. If I can't like write, then I walk. If I can't feel, I might hang out with a tree. If I can't talk, I'll doodle or play the guitar. And so when you change the setting, the environment, then basically what you're doing is just you're creating a release. So dry spell, really what that is just, it's a constriction where now you're not seeing what's actually there. So you're opening that up. So that's kind of like how I do it, is I get weird. I might do like a weird ritual. I might hold this strange object. I do this interesting thing called gorilla soul work. And when I say gorilla, I don't mean like, a wild ape. And I live in the Mississippi area of Portland, and it's very vibrant over here, especially in the summer. There's a lot of like tourists, and it's very alive. And so I do these sort of like little trickster rituals where I'll go out and like I'll talk to people. A couple months ago, there were these people on the street who were like trying to get signatures for maybe Save the Whales or whatever it was. And I was like, hey, I'm not gonna sign up, but what I will do is I'm gonna help you get some signatures. And so I'll like just walk down the street and I'll direct people towards these guys. I'll hype them up, so I'm like really like just ramping up the energy, and I can take that back, and I am like the creativity is like huge, right? So I think it's about moving into like action, real world experiences, to sort of just open things up. Learning from failure is an important part of the creative process. When there is failure, and I don't even call it failure, it's almost like feedback. Everything is information. And I ask questions. I might ask like, okay, maybe this it's not ripe enough yet. I'm going to put it back on the compost pile, right? Or what is this like maybe this is for something else, or maybe it's the wrong problem. But really nothing ever gets wasted is the way I see it. It's almost like dream fragments. This is an artifact for something for later. And it's so true. I've noticed that about books. I've had like over the last 20 years, maybe even 30 years, someone would give me a random book. I mean, okay, yeah, thanks, that looks cool. And I just put it on the bookshelf, don't read it for like 10 years, 20 years. And then I swear, that happens to me so many times. I'm like thinking about working on a project. I'm like, oh, I need to get that one book. And before I go to Amazon, I'll look on my bookshelf. And a lot of the time it's there, right? So it's the same kind of thing where it's like it's just a fragment for something for later. It's a reason that you're focusing on it. It came up for a reason. So it could be something for something else. So I'm all about, and that's really, to me, creativity is you're creating ritual. You're really like, it's almost like animism, where you're interested in the world around you. Everything is speaking, dreams, objects. So it's really about this process of attunement and respect. And when I say respect, that comes from the Latin root respicare, which means to see again. So sometimes that means you have to forget, right? So, and that's the thing about knowledge. You learn all this knowledge, but sometimes you have to just kind of forget. And then you learn something new from the same thing. So yeah, that's kind of how I treat that process. What really motivates me to just keep on trucking? Well, one thing is in my line of work, it's pretty common to experience burnout and compassion fatigue, especially during this time that we're in. And I definitely experienced that when I worked for an agency. But one of the benefits of opening up private practice was I was able to really hone in on a particular population of interest for me. And so now I found myself in a situation where I experience growth on a daily basis from working with clients. And one thing I think it's hugely important for any creative person or anyone working in their own field or running a business is to know what your mission is. Your mission, having clarity with your mission is so key. And so, I have a little formula that I use where I did this kind of exercise where I just kind of like, floated above my community and looked down. I'm like, what do I see that's missing? And what is my gift? How can I help this problem? And, for me, that mission was being fully and 100% present. And I want people to be seen and heard. So connection. And that was huge for me because that mission is actually tied to, I've most of my life I was very, very introverted and quiet, and so always had a tendency to kind of shy away and isolate. This mission has actually helped me to confront that shadow, and now it's the opposite for me. I am the complete opposite of an introvert. In a lot I do isolate because I work, but I have no issue at all because I'm connected to that mission so largely. And so it's something that's beyond you. And that's what you have to do, is find something that is way beyond you. It's not about you anymore. It's about the people. It's about community. It's about culture, right? And if you think about one thing that really, really keeps me going is if I'm able to connect to just one person, which also means being vulnerable, really seeing them, that one person could end up becoming that person that influences a million people. And then think about all those millions of people that they're going to influence. So it's huge. And that mission really, it's a driving force. So if I wake up and I'm like, I don't feel like working, it's really not that big of an issue. I mean, I do realize sometimes we need to rest. So I think we have to be in tune to that. But that's one thing that really, really keeps me going. Yeah, I do have a personal philosophy that governs my creative process, and a couple different. One is to always just listen, and I have this little acronym that I use with clients and myself, and it's RACE, RACE. So the R is radical, and so the A is acceptance, realizing that life is happening, the world is happening, you have no control over it. You can influence it, certainly, but if you are so focused on trying to manipulate, control everything, you're going to just create a lot of irritation. And so radical acceptance, and moving from external control to internal, that's where the freedom truly is internal control. How you respond to something is everything. And then the C is curiosity. Always be curious. And I use this image of Sherlock Holmes. And sometimes I'll do an experiment. I have clients do this where it's just pretend like you're Sherlock Holmes for one day. You're maybe you're an alien scientist from a different planet, and you're just discovering, you're listening, you're paying attention, So curiosity, and then with that, radical expression. So I think if you are really in tune, you're aware, you're curious, now you can truly express yourself. Follow the weird, honor the real, trust the symbols, make it beautiful, even if it's broken, right? And I love this image from the movie Ready Player One. And it's for those uninitiated, it's set in the future, and basically everyone has these virtual headsets, and they go into a video game every day, and there's this big race, and no one can beat it. And then there's one guy who's like, wait a minute, I'm going to drive my car backwards. That's how it's done. You just got to drive backwards. That's where the Easter egg is. And I've always been really interested in that, even from playing Nintendo as a kid. I'm like, what's over here in these other layers and stuff? Where's the edge? Where are the glitches? So yeah, find the glitches and rewild. I think it's a time now of rewilding, which means going back to primary satisfactions. And that means that could be gardening. That could just mean getting out in nature more, connecting to people. And that's a huge philosophy of mine. I call it the magic wheel, where it's when you do the work on yourself, now you can start reaching out to other people and spreading that light. And what I've noticed is when I start rekindling these old, forgotten friendships, connections with family members, it opens up this world. And it's interesting, I've noticed people connecting to me. I'll connect to 3 people in a month, and then all of a sudden I have people out of the blue connecting to me. So it's there's something interesting about that. So I think it's really a lot of that sort of awareness, curiosity, and then action, just moving into the world. This is a hugely creative time for me right now, like a renaissance. And I think it really just started with, the Trump administration. Like, I'm like, oh, he can do that. I can do anything I want. It was an interesting kind of a permission. And so I feel like, without getting political at all, I just feel like his role is very important. And without getting into any kind of like sort of a political affiliation or actual political actions or decisions, just that role I think is important in our society because it's breaking down all the stuff that doesn't work anymore. And it's I'm very interested in alchemy, the process of alchemy, where it's like you turn regular metals into gold, and to do that you got to put it in the fire. You got to burn away all the impurities, right? And the process is painful, but in that process you're going to find your gold. And that's what shadow work essentially is, all those movies, fantasy movies like Lord of the Rings. You always see the dragon in the dark cave, right? Well, it's guarding treasure. So you gotta fight the dragons. You gotta go in the dark. And so I think that for me has given me permission and created this renaissance. And so now what I'm doing is I'm expanding my practice and probably going to move into something a little different, which is retreats, and then doing workshops. And then I have this sort of like a creative school that I'm putting together called the Velvet Ambassador. And so I'm going to be working with creatives. I got my first client who's an aspiring stand-up comic. And so I'm helping her to activate like the theta state. And so that's my goal, is to work with creatives and to really just like ramp it up in a huge way. So that includes writing books, podcasts, that kind of thing. So just really kind of like just exploding. Yeah, threats to creativity. I think a lot of it is expectations. When you start moving into what the expectations are, you're kind of like creating a more of a ramp for yourself. And if you can operate with that acceptance and appreciation, I mean, even death, there's beauty in decay. I mean, and it also means that there is new life that's going to come from that, right? And it's the same thing with pain. Pain, challenges, difficult situations. That's where I've gotten most of my wisdom from. And in fact, a lot of my work around emotional mastery has come from some very challenging divorce and relationship struggles and a lot of difficult things. So understanding, I think, that the obstacle is the path, right? I think that's the biggest threat to creativity, is going back to default setting, and it's training yourself to understand that life is happening, but you also are a creator, and that is your mission and sole purpose. There's no life without creation. I mean, that's truly just what life is and what it wants from us. And I always like to use the example of like libido, or even like if there's a sexual urge. Really, what that is it's a neutral psychic energy that's sort of bubbling up. And if there's a sexual urge, it means, okay, creation, procreation, passing on your DNA. But also, it's just an available channel. If you do have an urge that comes up, you can channel it in a completely different way. So the Shakers, there's this religious group called the Shakers, right? And the Shakers, I think one of their rules was sexual abstinency, so no, complete sexual abstinence. And they were really amazing, like inventors and artists, and so they channeled all of that like into creativity, right? So that's I think the biggest lesson there is knowing that creation is life trying to move through you, and so just always listening, and from there always acting and always connecting and always doing. So like some closing thoughts that I have for creativity would be to I'd mentioned like rewilding and going back to the basics, taking a break from the phone, and I call it going analog. Just go analog. It's amazing what happens. It's truly amazing. I've experimented with that in the last month, where it's like I'll try to go maybe a half a day at the most. I do, in my line of work, I do have to communicate, but I do like not get on social media. And my partner and I, one time, were watching a movie or a show, and sometimes we have this tendency to like, oh, who's that one actor? And we're just on our phones, like looking stuff up. And I'm like, I replaced my phone with a notepad. I'm like, I'm just going to write notes, And it's really cool when you go analog, because it's like you're getting back to the primary satisfactions, and it's opening up an appreciation, right? And you're learning to create. That's the creation process, because we're in this world where the things are being fed to us, right? And so I think the creative process is to take us a step back and to fight dirty, don't ask permission, and be aware of the things that are sacred, because it's everywhere. So the other night, after I'd done the rivets and divots chant in the song, and I wrote this little piece, and it's really kind of like, in a way, it's a message to everyone, right? Words of wisdom, and it goes like this: don't wait to be ready, don't wait to be understood, and definitely don't wait for permission. Creativity isn't a hobby, it's a homing signal. It's how the deeper parts of you leave breadcrumbs through the forest of this very strange, burning world. So follow those breadcrumbs, even if they lead somewhere weird, especially if it leads somewhere weird. Make ugly things, make sacred things, make things that confuse you. Make them with your hands, your voice, your dreams, your grief, your laughter. Make them even if no one claps. Because the act of creating is the applause, it's the ceremony, it's the way you remember who you are and why you're still here. And when you hit doubt, and you will, do something ridiculous. Dance in public. Call in your ancestors. Tell a story that you're not supposed to tell. Make magic out of whatever's in arm's reach. Because creativity isn't about being brilliant, it's about being brave enough to be real. So make things that scare you a little bit, and then confuse you a little bit, that heal you, maybe quietly, that make the universe whisper, ah, there you are.